Welcome back to the show today, guys. This is your host, Teresa Davis. My guest today is Lisa Armstrong. Lisa is a homemaker who loves to spend time with her husband and her 2 golden retrievers. They recently sold their home in a full-time RV seeing the country. She enjoys hiking, traveling, cooking, and spending time in the Word with Jesus, her Savior. Lisa shares the heart of a mother when facing the suicide death of her son, Jacob. This is a hard story. But Lisa came today to share with you what she's learned on her journey. Words can't begin to explain the depth of pain a mother experiences when her child dies, and you're going to hear that pain in Lisa's voice today, but she wants to comfort you with the comfort that she's been given. If you're listening because you lost your child to suicide, or if you're listening because you want to know how to comfort someone who has experienced death by suicide, you're going to hear heartbreaking words, but you're also going to hear life-giving words. It's been 4 years since Jacob went to his heavenly home. Lisa shares words of wisdom that will lead the way toward healing in your journey. If this episode speaks to your heart today, guys, would you leave a review? Would you let Lisa and I know that we are making a difference in your journey? It would mean so much to us. I do want to mention to you that I have a YouTube channel. I've not advertised this very much because it's not something that I put much effort into. However, I do post all of the videos for the podcast. Now, there are a few podcasts where the video was not good enough quality to be able to use because of internet connection. But if you go to the Grief Mentor podcast with Teresa Davis, it's on YouTube, you will find most of them will have video along with the audio. You'll be able to leave comments there as well. And guys, if you have picked up your copy of Finding Hope and Healing in the Midst of Grief, it's a 30-day devotional for the brokenhearted. Would you leave me a review on Amazon? I would greatly appreciate that. It helps for exposure and it helps other people see the content of the book from the reader's perspective. I look forward to hearing from you. Welcome to the Grief Mentor podcast with Teresa Davis. It exists to restore hope, promote healing, and equip grieving souls for life after loss. I will illuminate God's Word through the eyes of grief and provide interviews that speak healing into the mind, body, and spirit of the brokenhearted. I'm so glad you're here. Lisa and I have come to know each other through our sons, and we met at a retreat. I think that was like in the spring of 2019. Is that your memory as well?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. I so remember you and Miles. You were sitting with Tony and I there on that first day. In fact, I think you and Miles were some of the first people that we actually interacted with after we had arrived there at the retreat center. And I've invited Lisa today to share her story with us. And I'm so thankful you said yes, Lisa. And I just want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Well, I'd like to start out today with you just sharing your story with us, yours and Jacob's story.
Okay. Well, first, let me show you Jacob's picture so everybody can see what he looks like.
Oh, he's so handsome. Hold it up there a little longer. Hold it up there a little longer.
Okay.
Because when I talked, it went away. I'll be quiet.
That's Jacob. Okay. So he was born December 23rd, 1990. I was married previously to Jacob's father, and we had tried for a long time to have a baby. I ended up having to take some infertility measures. So prayed and prayed for a baby, and God blessed us with Jacob. He was just a joy from the beginning. We always kind of idolize our kids, especially once they're gone, like they didn't do anything wrong. So I'm just going to talk about all the good stuff for a little bit. He was my only child. It took so long for us to have him that I couldn't have anymore. And Jacob's father and I ended up getting divorced when Jacob was about 5. He passed away actually right after we got divorced, a little bit afterwards. So it was just Jacob and I for a while until Miles, my husband, came into our life. And we got married when Jacob was 7. So Jacob always considered Miles his dad because he was. And Jacob was so loved by my family. We were just a very close family. We did all the holidays together. We just my parents went to all his games. My brothers were at his games. He was just very loved. He was very social. He wasn't a big like jokester or, kidding around or anything like that. He was kind of serious. I think it's because he was an only child and he'd rather kind of be around adults and just learn. But he loved his friends. He was always there for his friends. When they needed a shoulder to cry on or something, they came to Jacob. He was very empathetic child. He went to the same little school from 3K to 8th grade and little Christian school and had the same friends, just a great, great school. We lived in Georgia at the time. That's where I'm from originally, and that's where Jacob was raised. And then in 9th grade, we moved to Huntsville, Alabama, because my husband, Miles, had retired from the Army and he got a job over in Huntsville. So we moved there. And Jacob started a new school and fit right in. He just always did. And he loved sports, but football was his favorite. And he played football. And he and I were so close. We were like two peas in a pod. He was a mama's boy, and he was not ashamed to say, "Yep, that's my mama, and I love her." And we were just so, so close. We liked to travel. He and I did a lot of adventures together. We went rock climbing in Maine, which is where I am now. We went whitewater rafting in Colorado. We went to the jungles of Costa Rica. I'm very thankful for all the memories I have of traveling with him. He liked to cook. He was a very good chef. He was good at that. And so, sorry, all my thoughts are just getting jumbled up.
That's okay. Just take your time. I'm just enjoying hearing. Although, I never met Jacob, but I followed your story and just seen so many adventures and fun things that you guys did. I mean, it just sounds like you guys had a blast. The travel and just being able to spend the time together. It just sounds like you guys had a good time.
Yes, we did. Very thankful for all those memories I have with him. So back to when he started the new school, like I said, he started football. He made friends. He just really thrived. But I could see his grades starting to go down from his straight A's to some B's and some C's. And towards the end of his high school, I could see a sadness in Jacob that I'd not seen before. And I thought it was just normal teenage angst or, just sadness. And I would ask him, "Is there anything you want to talk to me about?" Because we talked about everything. He knew he could come to me with anything. I'm say, "Are you depressed?" Or, I didn't know anything about depression because I don't have a history of it. So I didn't think anything about it because on the outside, Jacob had everything. He had great friends, a great girlfriend, car, family that loved him. Just the typical, you think, what does somebody have to be sad about, which is not the way it works at all. Now I know that, but no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And he had 3 concussions with football. So I'll touch on that in a little bit. Just keep that in mind. He had 3. This last one, he had to stop playing football. I had to take him to the hospital. When you are at a school in Alabama, you go to college at Auburn or Alabama. Those are the 2. That's what you do. And everybody knows it. So Jacob, being different, didn't want to do that. All his friends were going over. He said, "Well, I want to apply to the University of Colorado in Boulder." It's so random. He did. He got into all the schools he applied for. So he got into there. He wanted to go out there. So I told Miles, "Well, I'm going to have to move to Colorado because I can't be that far away from him." I mean, that's how he was my world. And I seen out it was just he was just everything to me. And I couldn't imagine being in Alabama and him being in Colorado. So Miles was so sweet and so good. He was working. I rented a house in Colorado Springs and Jacob was in Boulder. So that was still like 2 hours apart. But anyway, that's what I did.
Well, at least Colorado, what a beautiful, what a beautiful.
And I always thought it'd be so neat to live there. So off we went. And he gets to school and he's just so unhappy. And I can see it now looking back how nothing was satisfying to him. He would come to Colorado Springs every weekend instead of being there with the new friends he met because he met new friends there. And he was just unsettled. He didn't know what he wanted to do with a career. And we had always told him, you don't have to go to college. We weren't these people like, you go to college for investment, because I went to trade school. I was an ultrasound tech. That's a great allied health, go to the
Absolutely.
military,
Yeah.
just something, anything, it's just not meant for everybody. No, no, I want to go to college. So he went for a semester there and he was so miserable. So what did he want to do? He wanted to go back to Auburn where all his friends were. So Aki went back to Auburn, and because we still had a house there in residency. So I'm like, well, if you're going to go, you might as well go. So here I am stuck in Colorado, and Miles and Jacob are back in Auburn. I made it back to Alabama, and he's doing school and he seems to be fine. And I mean, I think, he's a good actor. I could see now, but he went to school. He met a new girlfriend, and I'm still very close to his girlfriend he had. And he was just, I thought everything was fine. And then summer came and he said he wanted to stay and make up some hours because he was kind of behind from transferring. And I'm like, you don't have to. I mean, as much as you don't like school. No, no, I want to. So by the end of summer, I never had gotten a bill for summer school. And I kept asking, where's the bill? I haven't gotten it. And he was saying something that it would come eventually. And I just believed him because I was like, okay, well, I need it. I need to pay this bill and I want to know your grade. You have to give me access to your grades because even though you're paying the bill, you have to have permission from the school to have access to their grade, which is crazy to me. So then fall started and long story short, I still hadn't gotten a bill for summer. So I called them and they said, well, he was never in summer school. So he had just lied to me. He had just been down there doing nothing. And I was so upset with him for just not being honest with me. And I called him because I had been telling him to give me your grades, give me access to your grades. And he just kind of didn't put me off. And I said, this is it. I'm coming down there if you don't give me access to your grade and tell me what's going on. I know you weren't in summer school. Are you even enrolled in fall? And he said, give me 15 minutes. My computer's dead. And I was so mad at him for just being dishonest with me. And we never had like arguments or anything, but I was so mad at him. And we got off the phone. And about 15 minutes later, I kept trying to call him because we never ended phone calls in an argumentative way. And I was trying to call him and he wouldn't answer. And I knew his girlfriend was going over there that evening for her birthday. He was cooking her dinner. And I was like, I can't get in touch with Jacob. And she said, he's probably just resting, and I just didn't have a good feeling. And then at 7:00 that night, I've been trying to call him from 3 to 7. And I got a phone call from his roommate's mom and said, Jacob hung himself. And I said, he's dead. And she said, an ambulance is coming. But I knew she wasn't telling me the truth. I knew. And it was kind of like a short way to tell the story, but I don't know. It just all came crashing down so fast. I had no idea. I knew he was sad and unsettled and couldn't get settled, but I had no idea that it was that dark, that he was that desperate. And right then is when my life ended as I knew it, and this new life began.
Well, Lisa, I'm just processing. I'm just trying to take it all in. Thank you for sharing those extremely vulnerable moments with me and our listeners, because the whole time you're talking, and which I knew part of your story, but hearing it again, I mean, it's just piercing to my soul. And I'm sitting here just thinking how I raised two children that went to college. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you kids do things like Jacob did. They get away to school and things change and they meet different people and their lives changed a little bit. And all of us probably that have had sent kids off to college have experienced some sort of different attitudes from our kids and routines. I mean, and never in a million years would you expect something like this to happen. And just the overwhelm of it, just trying to work through it all. I mean, I can't put myself in your shoes, Lisa. I just can't. I mean, I can't imagine getting that phone call and knowing that He was carrying so much on his shoulders that he was hiding from everybody, because kids do that. They want to protect the people they love. And just raising kids myself in those 20, in that 20s, 18 to their life changes and they just become different people sometimes. Because I followed your story, Lisa, I know that you did not turn your back on God. I know I see your spiritual journey now. I know where you are now, but where were you then? Because so many folks have been affected by suicide, and there's so much misunderstanding out there.
Yeah.
I want to get into, teach us things in a minute, but if you'll just take us through kind of your spiritual journey through the time after Jacob died to kind of where you are now. Because how long has that been?
It'll be 4 years, September 5th.
4 years, September. Oh, wow. So you're right on top of the anniversary of his 7th day. So yeah, if you won't mind, share with us the spiritual journey that you've been on.
Yes. Well, I grew up in a Christian home, and I have been a Christian since I was a little girl. I mean, I asked Jesus in my heart. I always have been. And one thing I want to say is, before I forget, is Jacob made 2 decisions. First decision was to ask Jesus into his heart and ask him to be his savior when he was young. And the second was taking his life. And that last one doesn't outdo the first one.
Amen.
And so I know where Jacob is. I know because he knew Jesus where he is. And I knew when this happened, I was driving home. I was in my car driving when I got that phone call. I don't know how I made it home. And I was just screaming. And I called Miles and just was yelling, he's dead. And Miles was out the driveway. He didn't know what was going on. And I literally fell out of the car to the driveway. Miles carried me into the house. And I said, you should leave me because I'm not the woman you married. I can't live without him. But I knew that somewhere deep down, I could feel God arms around me. I have not been mad at God. I've asked him, why did it have to be this way? I truly believe Psalm 139:16, all our days were ordained before one of them came to be. And if I trust in every verse in the Bible, I trust in that. But I would ask God, why did it have to be this complicated way of dying? So we'll get into that, with suicide, it's just a whole nother level. But right from the beginning, I just knew the Lord was with me. And one day, about 2 weeks after I thought I was at my end. I said, God, I cannot do this. And I promise you, Teresa, I felt like the Lord's arms around me. I haven't felt it since or before, but like, I've got you, Lisa. And it was just the comfort. And it's just, I was so alone. I didn't know anybody who had lost a child. I knew no one. I was like, what am I going to do? Then I met you guys, all you guys at the respite retreat. That wasn't even a year. I wasn't a year out. And the Lord brought me. And I'm still close to y'all. Some of my closest friends. And then I have met just the most wonderful people who love the Lord, who have lost kids along the way. That I'm like, these people are amazing to me. And I see how God has just brought people, the ministry while we're waiting. We'll get into that into my life. And I hate that it took my relationship with the Lord has just done a 180. I've just grown stronger than I ever thought I would. And I hate that it took this. But that seems to be kind of the story with people sometimes. Either you turn away or you get closer. And I thought God was good before he took Jacob. And I knew people lost kids. And I was like, well, he's God. He's good. He's who he said he is. So when I lost Jacob, my thought was, who am I to think he's not good now because my son got taken? I mean, I'm not above any of these people all along history who have lost kids who still worship the Lord. I'm so thankful that he is just faithful and willing because he's the only hope I have. And I don't understand how people do it without him. And if people don't believe, I just want them to look at me and know I told God before I lost Jacob, if I ever lose him, I can't live. But here I am 4 years later,
Well, your testimony, Lisa, is so moving because I think your spiritual maturity shines through that you never looked at God like it was his fault. You
Mhm.
you felt his arms around you, loving you and carrying you through this, which is a tremendous testimony to so many that have gone through tragedy of any kind. And I feel like that gives people hope. The fact that you said you couldn't live without him, but yet here you are. And we know that we can't do that in our own strength. You
Mm-mm.
know, I love the verse
No.
in Hebrews 6, I believe it's 6:19, that says that his hope is strong and trustworthy and an anchor for our souls.
Anchor.
Because
Yeah.
I think you might agree with me that you're so lost that you
Mhm.
don't have direction. You're just lost in a wilderness wandering around. And that anchor
Yeah.
of his trust and hope is what keeps us from losing our minds, really.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
and gives us some guidance there along the way.
Yeah.
What would you so there's so much misunderstood about suicide, and
Mhm.
I'd like for you to share with us, teach us about death by suicide. What do we need to know?
Well, so I probably read every book now since losing Jake. I mean, faith-based and secular, just trying to learn about the mind. And so, first of all, I never really gave a thought to mental illness, but it is real. It's like what Jacob had. He wasn't diagnosed, but had he still been here, I'm sure he would be diagnosed with obviously depression, but maybe bipolar too, where he was more of a depressive, not manic state, because that sometimes evolves when you're like 18 or 19. Plus his concussion. There's never, I think, any one reason why somebody takes their life. Of course, I thought that last conversation we had when I was yelling at him, why didn't you go to school? I thought for the first few weeks, I killed him. I might as well have just killed him because he was so upset. We were arguing. But that was the enemy trying to make me feel guilt. Those feelings don't come from the Lord. And so I had to know that Jacob was at a dark, dark place that I don't understand because I've had situational depression from losing him, but it's only from losing him. I've never had clinical depression. I've never felt like I'm such a burden to somebody. I have to do this to give them relief because when you lose somebody to suicide, you feel like, why wasn't my love enough for them? That's not the way it works. They're not thinking rationally. Yes, he made a decision, but it wasn't like a decision like, what am I going to have for dinner? The enemy was in his head, all these things. It was like a perfect storm. And that was just something. And I still have to battle with feelings of guilt of things I could have done different, but that's with all of us.
I want to go back to something you just said because I just think it's
Mhm.
profound. You said, correct me if I'm wrong, we think that our love for them is enough. I,
Mhm.
I just think that's profound because especially
Yeah.
as mothers, we
Right.
and I think so much of what you're saying, Lisa, is so many people's stories. And so I just can't thank you enough for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
And I do think
And
I want to draw attention to the fact that people understand that mental illness is huge.
And I appreciate that the world's trying to make it, it's being more talked about and more open about it. Now, one thing there's a couple things that bug me. When people will say that they were just weak or they were cowards. Well, that's not true. What Jacob did was a sin, but he was not a coward and he was not weak. It was an act of desperation. When people say, well, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Well, that's it is, but that's not, and I've read from people that have survived. That's not the way they say it. You can't just minimize their feeling. It's just a temporary, just choose joy. That's not the way they feel. They don't see it like that. And I have a problem, but just kind of suicide prevention. I'm more about awareness But I was aware. I knew Jacob was smart. He knew he could call a number. He was never just pick up the phone to call a number. I mean, I appreciate all these things too, but it just kind of minimizes suicide prevention. It makes the person who lost somebody by suicide, well, it was preventable. You could have stopped it. Well, I couldn't have. It's just a lot on the survivors left.
You said people say it's a permanent solution for a temporary problem. And I'm no expert, but however, it doesn't feel temporary to them.
It sure doesn't. And it can be a lifelong, just like cancer or any disease. Your brain is so complex. And you add on there that your brain's not developed to 24 something. And another very common thread with the groups we've led is concussion. That's just one thing. I don't blame anything. I know it was just, like I said, it was a bunch of things put together, but I know that didn't help because that rattles your brain around. And I worried about Jacob from the time I found out I was pregnant because it took so long. I worried about him dying of kids. I worried about his friends drinking and driving. Don't do that. Don't get in a wreck or getting kidnapped. I never worried about suicide. It did not cross my mind. So, and I'm guilty of thinking that suicide only happens to certain kind of people. I probably was like, well, what kind of family or this or that? Just wrong thinking. It can happen. It happens to the best of families. I'm not saying we were perfect, but when we were a good family, he was so loved. If love could have saved him, he'd be here. But that's not the way it works with suicide. And it's like a bomb exploding when you hear your child has taken their life because he was made in the image of God. And I heard that he did this to God. And I heard he did this to us. And so here you're trying to fight these feelings of anger towards the person who's not here anymore, your child. It's a lot. And it's the second leading cause of death for kids his age. I think it's like 17 to 24.
Yes.
It's a lot.
I've read some of those recent statistics, which changed during COVID as well.
COVID, it didn't help.
Yeah. If somebody's listening to us today, Lisa, who has just started this journey, what can you tell them for first steps?
Mm-hmm. First of all, be careful what social media you get on. I have to find something. So every bereaved mom site or parent site I was getting on, it just made me feel worse because a lot of times they're secular sites and they have no hope in the Lord. And so it was just like, it's 10 years and I don't feel any better. And I thought, I can't live if it doesn't literally feel any better than it does right now, 2, 3 a month out. You can't breathe. How does it not feel any better? It was just so frustrating. To me, I had to find a group. I was desperate to find other parents. Now, also be careful with that because some groups you can go to can be the same way, can leave you feeling worse. So, I mean, it's obvious my only hope is the Lord. So I had to find a faith-based group of people that had lost kids that their hope was in the Lord too, because we went to a group that wasn't that way and it was not good.
We had a similar experience. We had gone to Grief Share, which I'm not sure. Have you and Miles done Grief Share?
Yes. Mm-hmm. We did.
So I would recommend that. But we went to another organization for child loss that was not faith-based, and I couldn't wait to get out of there.
Oh, I know. Same. I couldn't even I certainly couldn't read my Bible at the beginning. I couldn't focus and I didn't even know what to pray, but God knows. Just help me. I don't know how many times I uttered that. Help me, God. And I still do sometimes. There's days. So
you're touching close to home for me too, because I could not pray, couldn't read the Bible, and I would lay in bed and all I would say was, help me, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just encourage everybody out there that when you're in that space that you just described to us, Lisa, you don't have to have fancy prayers to connect with our Father and the Holy Spirit. All we have to do is say, help me, Jesus. So just to recap, you say, be careful what social media you get on, find a faith-based group or a group that you can draw strength from and pray, even if it's just saying, help me, Jesus.
Yes. I have one more kind of little practical things that I wish I would have done. For me, going to the grocery store was one of the hardest things because he and I like to go. He liked to eat snack. I had certain things I bought him, and it was just crushing to me to go to the store. If you can just order your groceries online, if this has just happened to you, just do it. Just try to avoid situations that are going to be hurtful to you. That was really hard for me. That was just a little. I wish I'd have done that.
I think that's great advice because, the vulnerability of stepping out into a public setting is really scary in the very beginning because you don't know who's going to come up to you. You don't know what they might say, and people's intentions are good, Lisa. I wanted to touch on something you said earlier. It's like, now you know things you didn't know. So many of us that's walked this road can agree with that statement. Now we know things we didn't know. I've said things to people that I shouldn't have said. I didn't mean harm.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I didn't mean harm, but I just didn't know.
No.
But that I agree with you. The grocery store is a very vulnerable place because you don't know who you're going to run into. You don't know what they're going to say. You don't know how you're going to respond. Order your groceries online. That's a great tip. Yeah, order them online. Well, let's talk about some resources. First, I want you to tell us some resources that you have found helpful in your journey. And then I'd like for you to share with us the ministry that you have become a part of.
Mm-hmm. I read a lot of books at first. I'm sorry, I can't remember the names of them. I've literally ordered any book that was faith-based about child law. So that helped me, but some people don't like to read. So you can listen to an audiobook and there are some specific to suicide that Christians have written that were helpful. When we were about a year out, well, a little before, I guess it's before I met you guys at the rescue retreat, we had started going to a support group that we found called While We're Waiting. And they had a monthly support group there in Huntsville, and we would go. And some of my dearest friends still to this day are there. I do miss that because we full-time RB now, so I don't have a support group. But I found out that they do a ministry in Arkansas is where it stays. So at about the 1 year mark, we went to a retreat there While We're Waiting and got to meet all those good folks there, Jill and Brad and Larry and Janice. And it was a really great retreat. And while I was there, Jill said, we have a suicide specific retreat. And I said, do what? Sign me up. So it wasn't until the next year because they were so full. They only had a couple. So we went to that the next October. So a year later. And so that's so wonderful because A, to have a child loss retreat, and then B, to have one that's just everybody there has lost a child to suicide. I just can't say enough about it. So then eventually Jill and Brad asked if Miles and I would help facilitate some retreat. And it's expanded, as you know, Teresa, the retreat. They're just all over the country, really. And the backlog, even for the suicide retreats, was so much. It was like 2 years backlog. So us and a couple of friends of ours, we help facilitate retreats all over. We have like 3 plans for next year. Then there's at least 4 other couples that do suicide specific retreats. And that's just been, that ministry is such a blessing. I can't say enough about it.
Well, and I echo everything you just said. And I did not know that there was retreats just for suicide. And when Jill shared that with me, I started mentioning that because it's such a need and it has grown so much. So I will include that in the show notes, how to reach out to find a site. So if they find a site that they want to attend, I guess they just email Jill and then she can tell them whether or not there's a waiting list. And I do want to encourage people that, Tony and I, the first time, I don't know about you and Miles, but we were on a waiting list for our first visit to the retreat for the While We Were Waiting. And we did go sooner than expected because people, things come up and people do change. So don't get discouraged.
Still sign up.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And especially, we're already signed up to do help facilitate 3 retreats next year. And then there's the other ones too. And we're doing the back-to-back ones in Arkansas next year. So we're just going to stay the whole week, us and our friends, and that'll be good. We just want to try to get as many people off the waiting list. And Yeah, always just sign up. Even if there's a waiting list, you'll get in sooner than later.
I'm so intrigued by the fact that you're a full-time RVer. So I love share a little bit about that with us, because I think it's important for people to understand life in general, but especially when you're grieving, what fills you up and what drains you.
Mhm.
Because I remember working through that myself personally, because I was so confused, after we lost our son. And I think maybe Lisa, you feel the same way. It's just like you're so barraged with so much emotion and all the things. I couldn't figure out what filled me up and what drained me. And,
Mhm.
grief is exhausting. And once you are into the journey a little ways, you're so exhausted. You're just trying to find a way to get some relief. So let's talk about that a minute, how important it is to figure out what fills you up and what drains you. And then tell us
Yeah.
why you're a full-time RVer.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree when they say don't make any rash decisions the first year. I was like probably a month out, and I told Miles that the Lord was telling me that we should move to Africa and be missionaries. He said, "The Lord is not telling you that." I said, "Well, I just wanted to leave. I just, because things didn't mean anything to me anymore. Like material things or just stuff. It was just, it was too much." But we didn't do that, of course. But we moved, I don't know how long it was after that when COVID started. Miles went to teleworking because he's a contractor for the Army still and based in Huntsville at Redstone Arsenal. And so we moved back to Georgia, and we moved to the mountains in Georgia and got a house up there that I loved so much because I love the mountains. And so we were there about a year. Obviously, Jacob got a lot from me because I can't stay settled, I guess. But about a year into that, the market was crazy, the housing market. And I said, we should try to sell our house and see if we can get, some crazy amount for it and full-time RV, because Miles was still working. He was like, what? He said, Lisa, so many things would have to line up because we had a boat to sell. We would have to buy a truck, our RV, the house to sell. Well, of course I prayed about it. I was like, is this just something I want more? But it all just boom, boom, boom. It all worked out within like a month. Our house was sold. That started in November, and we started full-time RVing. And we worked our way down to the Keys in the summer. And then we've been over as far as like South and North Dakota. And then we made our way back over here. We're in New England. I like to travel. It gives me something to look forward to plan these trips. And people are like, oh, you're so lucky. And I think and this is people that don't know, Lost Jake don't know. I'm like, if you only knew, I'm just waiting till I'm home with the Lord. And this is just something I'm doing along the way. I'm so thankful that He's allowed us to do this. And I get to see His beauty and creation is what gives me joy and the hope of what's to come.
I was waiting for you to say that, because your pictures, because you posted something recently that Alice loved. It was a sunset. Where were you?
Yeah, we were just down the street. It was here in Maine. It was the most beautiful sunset I had ever seen. Yeah. And then the next morning we got up and we went Cadillac Mountain at Acadia National Park. Is the first place to see the sunrise in the US. And I've always wanted to do it. And so we went up, and it was a little cloudy. It was still pretty, and there was no chance of rain. Well, it was raining all around us, but not on us. And then there was this beautiful double rainbow. And that's just always my God wink. I love rainbows and bald eagles. I've seen like 3 bald eagles this week, and that I love rainbows. So just that's always like, Miles said, there's your rainbow. And I just cried because I'm like, that's God saying, Lisa, I see you. I knew it was everybody's rainbow, but it felt like a hug just for me. Like, Jacob's good. He's more than good. And I promise you, I'm always here. So that's for a crazy RV journey. Everybody's like, and we literally sold like everything, all our furniture. And it was very freeing because we had this 4,000 square foot house, just the two of us. It was too big. And all this stuff we've accumulated. And just to get rid of most of it, but my personal stuff, we like it.
2 things about what you said. Number one, I believe that God can do whatever he wants. So when he wants to shine on us and let us know that he sees us, he's going to do that. And he's such a good God. And I hope someone who's listening to us that is where you were, Lisa, in the beginning of our talk, I hope that they can look forward to seeing the goodness of God.
Yes.
Sometimes it's really hard to see at the
Yes.
very beginning. It was very
It
hard for
is.
me to see. I had a little bit different journey than you, but to be able to look forward to being where you are right now and being able to walk outside your RV and be able to see the goodness of God and nature. And I want to encourage people that grief slows us down. Would you agree, Lisa?
Yes, absolutely.
And it cuts through the chafe. It quickly helps us prioritize what's important and what's not.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that? Yeah.
Yes. That's why it's hard to be around just mundane conversation sometimes. Just, just with people that don't understand. It's exhausting. It is. I just want to talk about Jesus and Jacob, and I really just don't want to talk.
Well, I had to be, my daughter once told me, Mom, you have very strong nonverbal communication. So I'm taking that to heart. And I know early, I didn't know, Lisa,
Yeah.
but I've taken that to heart because everything is trivial. I mean, when you've walked the road of child loss, everything, your lens that you view life is completely different. And so, and I hope this helps somebody who's listening, because your world it's turned upside down and nothing is the same. And so our view of life is different. And I feel like things that exactly what you said, I would walk into conversations and I would think to myself, I can't stand this, because it was so trivial, and to them it was so important, and I didn't want to be rude. And so I had to remember what my daughter said about my nonverbal and just kind of politely excuse myself, because
Yes, just do that and don't feel bad. That's another. Do what you need to do. I can't go to a wedding right now. If you have to go, that's fine. But I'm more comfortable at a funeral. Just don't feel like you have to do everything.
I think that's really good advice, because people have expectations of us, but they're not us. So, people want us, our friends and people who love us, they're surrounding us with love, but they have expectations of us. But it's real important to just really try to figure out what's safe in the beginning, especially. Even now, we're coming up on 4 years too. And we just recently went to a wedding, and 2 weddings, and it was difficult. It was difficult. And all from all different perspectives. For me, I could see my son. For you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's something that you're not going to be able to experience with your son.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So for many different reasons, people have situations that make it difficult. So just be kind to yourself and realize that in time, you may be able to venture out into some of those areas that feel very vulnerable to you right now. But it's okay to create that safe place. Would you agree with that, Lisa? It's okay to
absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I want to give you the last word. I want you to share anything that you haven't shared that you feel like would be beneficial for somebody who's walked the same path you have.
If you're new, if this has just happened to you, it is not going to always be this gut-wrenching pain that it is now. I wanted somebody to tell me that. Like, am I going to be able to breathe? Yes, you will be able to breathe. You'll be able to smile. I don't miss Jacob any less than I did. I miss him more, but I just look at it as it's one day closer. Every day is one day closer to him and the Lord. Even you just say to yourself, I can do this. I can do this Monday. And then it'll be tomorrow, and you might have a better day tomorrow, but know that, it's some days that comes crashing down on me, but I know that the Lord is going to sustain me and he's going to help me. He is the peace that passes all understanding. Didn't really mean anything to me before this. Just a verse I read. But he does. We can't understand how we can still laugh and smile and have joy and happiness in the midst of this. But that's only through him. He was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. I say that to myself over and over. He knows. And also a big thing that's big with me is God's sovereignty. That God wasn't running behind Jacob going, I did not have any idea this was going to happen to Jacob. What am I going to do? He didn't. He knew. No, my mind can't process free will and God's sovereignty, but I don't have to understand everything. Yes, Jacob had free will, but God knew. We're not control of death. We don't have that much power. I mean, we're not God. We're not sovereign, but he knows. And this life is just a blank of an eye. And this is not our home. The best is yet to come. I just tell myself all these things and just, even if you can just read a little bit of Psalm or something to help yourself know that what he says is true. He's who he says he is.
You've mentioned this already. Connect with people that's been through what you've been through. And then,
Yes.
you're using your pain and your sorrow to help others. Lisa, can you tell people what that does, how that helps your journey?
Jacob was so much more than what his last desperate act. He was so much more. I want to spend my life telling this story, glorifying God and honoring Jacob. And that God has brought me to the point where I'm able to facilitate retreats. That's all him. That's not me. But just to see people come in so scared and broken on a Friday, and then there's this like family on a Sunday, to see that he has done that. Oh, it's just to be able to comfort others with the comfort you've been given. It really is. That's what it's all about, because that's what we're called to do. And I don't want to waste this sorrow, this awful, awful thing.
Well, I think that's a great way to end the show, Lisa, to be able to comfort those with the comfort that we've been given.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your vulnerability with all of us, Lisa. And I'll include in the show notes a link for the While We Are Waiting retreats. And I just want to say, guys, that this show has touched your heart and given you hope for your journey. Would you please let us know by leaving a review and letting Lisa and I know how this episode has helped you today? And that is all I have for you today, guys. So until next time, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Grief Mentors podcast with Teresa Davis. Subscribe or follow wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to share this episode with someone in your sphere of influence that needs it today.